All right. Hello, everybody. Thanks so much for joining. My name is Joshua Zweig. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Zip Security. We help companies without big security teams do security very well. And I'm joined here by Ryan and Michael, two partners we've gotten the chance to work with a lot to support customers. So looking forward to speaking with you both today, talking a little bit about AI, some of the risks and rewards, how we're seeing it impact our roles. The review is a nice kind of panel composition here. We each see a little bit of a different part of kind of the customer journey as they're embarking on the long road of cybersecurity. So, yeah, looking forward to the conversation. Ryan, maybe I could invite you to do a quick introduction to start, and Michael, we'll go to you.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks, Josh, and really happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me. I'm excited for the conversation today. I'm Ryan Winkler. I'm a director at 360 Advanced. My main role is to help our clients navigate the world of compliance and cybersecurity through assessments and risk assessments. Been doing this for about 15 years now. And, obviously within the last 5 years or so, doing more AI and helping build our AI practice and our offerings. And, looking forward to all the questions that we'll go over today.
All right, great. Thanks so much. Yeah, Michael, give us a quick introduction.
Sure. Michael Markulec. I'm the partner and co-founder of Harbor Technology Group. We provide cybersecurity, information security consulting, advisory services, primarily to what I'll call the mid-market enterprise, right? Those 25 to 250 employee companies, mainly focused around regulatory issues, compliance issues. We do a lot of SOC 2. We're doing a lot of CMMC currently. So we help our clients move through that, you know, compliance journey.
Excellent. All right. I know this is an AI panel, but Michael, you've already baited me a whole minute in here. CMMC with the regulatory changes. What's going on?
Yeah, so let's maybe a way to ease into the AI pool. Yeah, so after 7 years of the Department of Defense, Department of War, laying out cybersecurity requirements, 60 days from one of the big milestones, they threw a big monkey wrench into it. So for those that don't know, CMMC is a compliance framework primarily for defense contractors, but is expanded to other areas of the U.S. government procurement system. And everybody was supposed to be headed for phase two, which required a third party audit. The government determined that the third party audits were time consuming, were costly, and has kind of paused the program to reevaluate. Our guidance to all of our clients is kind of stay the course. You haven't been relieved of any of the requirements. You still have to protect the government data. You still have to meet all of the control framework. You just don't have to get the third party certification right now.
Which was
I
a
can't.
pretty long pole in the tent.
Yeah. Well, so you still got to self assess. But the problem with self assessing is I'd like to think everybody's honest, but everybody's not
Yeah,
honest.
sure. All right. Well, yeah, very interesting. Well, what are you seeing? Are people sitting tight while they do the 60-day review? Is it just kind of business as usual? My guess
I
would be it's mostly business as usual, but people
Mostly
will probably
business
want to
as
start a
usual,
new
right? Because you
project for
don't
2
get
months.
away. You don't get away from having to protect the information. You don't get away from having the controls. Matter of fact, DCMA, Defense Contracting Administration Association Administration, is still doing internal audits, right? So DCMA is still conducting their audits of the supply chain. It's just this third party validation that is been on hold. So again, our guidance is stay the course. If you haven't scheduled a third party assessment, I might wait the 60 days out to see if what's going to come out in the near future. But if you already have an audit scheduled, I wouldn't postpone it or stop it.
Yeah, that seems like good advice. Excellent. All right. Well, go to the topic at hand. I promise I won't do too much asking the question down the line, but maybe for the first one we can. And Ryan, maybe we can start with you. I'd love
Sure.
to just hear from your perspective this year, like in your relationships and conversations with clients, tell us about how AI has maybe taken a front seat or shaped some of those conversations for you this year.
Yeah, so really the main message that I'm trying to put across to a lot of my clients is how the attack surface of AI, it's making AI is making the attack surface shift quite a bit. Where typically you don't really have to deal with a lot of organizations are using LLMs and they're using API calls, so you don't really have to deal with things like inference attacks and whatnot. But one of the things that is the biggest threat that I keep trying to drive home with my clients is that the cost and experience of running attack are completely different now. It is a lot cheaper to run an attack, and the experience of running an attack you don't need as much because you can have AI write the scripts for you. you know One of the biggest shifts that I'm seeing is how AI is shifting away from more of a technical level of attack, I mean reconnaissance, to doing more reconnaissance on the human element. And what I mean by that is AI can be used now to gain actionable reconnaissance on their victims in a fast and easy way. And this means that phishing and deepfake attacks can more easily lure someone because it's more personalized to them. And so those are the types of things that I drive home with my clients. It is about the technology, but it's also about protecting the people too.
That's great. I like something you said, I think is really important, which is, there's certainly some class of like new kinds of attacks in surface area, but like by and large, and for the average company, especially the kinds that I think we all work with, really the moral of the story or the big upshot here is that it's the same classes of attacks, but now the cost of executing them is much, much cheaper. And we're seeing them impact way more organizations at a larger scale, because, well, the marginal cost of running these is so much cheaper than seems to be the
Exactly.
route people are taking. So yeah, I think that's exactly right. Michael, tell us from your side, same question. Yeah, how is
Yeah,
AI
on
taking
that,
a front seat in or changing or shaping some of these conversations?
it's sticking with the again, we're going to talk for a while, but I break AI really into kind of into three buckets, right? There's the attack surface, which we'll talk about right now, right? There's the side where what are you doing with AI? What are you sharing? What are you putting into your AI systems? And then we've got this whole shadow IT, now shadow AI, which is folks are going out and signing up for things, and the company doesn't even know. But sticking with with bucket one, I think it's not only the cost of the attack, but I think the attacks are better targeted, right? So we saw the 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 smishing, right? You get a text that says, go buy gift cards, and it comes from, and it's signed by the CEO, but you don't know the number. Well, now somebody could take this recording, AI our voices, and turn it into a combo attack, right? So they can send the text message, they can follow up with a phone call that sounds like the CEO. Um, and so you're getting these attacks that are more, I don't want to say targeted, but more accurate, more real world. You look at the quality of the phishing attacks, they've gotten better,
Yeah.
right? It's not that they're more sophisticated, but their use of grammar, their use of language, their use of industry specific terms, right? Go read my blog, and next thing you know, you understand how I communicate, and therefore you can craft an email, a targeted email with real world information. So I think AI has kind of upped the game for the bad guy, even if it hasn't changed the attack surface, right? It's still business
Yeah.
email compromise. We still know what that looks like. It's just made those attempts better.
100%. And think about it too, is using AI. The blast radius is even increased because you can use different languages now and attack, different countries based on different languages, things you didn't even, languages you don't even know. AI can craft a perfectly, good phishing email, customized to a person in a different language. An interesting statistic that I actually read in KnowBefore's phishing threat report in 2026, 86% of phishing emails are now AI generated. That's an interesting fact.
Yeah, yeah. The dark days of the Nigerian prince and one email going out to millions of folks. It doesn't work that way anymore, right? That same email is now in your language, using terms from your industry, all based upon AI's ability to collect data. Yeah, Ryan, that's right. And there again is it drops the cost for the bad guy, right? They could cast a wider net. They can, cast a better net, all because of the AI technology that they're using.
Yeah, one class of thing, I feel like our phones were ringing off the hook for a little while earlier this year where, initial access has obviously always been pretty cheap. But then from there, what do you do with it? And we've seen, especially, with LMs, people's ability to just hang out in different inboxes they might have compromised for a while and just wait for it to be the perfect time to say, oh, yeah, it's the perfect time to follow up with fraudulent wire transfer information and this kind of thing. So
Yeah.
the cost going down has definitely increased the volume quite a bit. One thing I'm curious for is, so there's two different conversations here, really, on the compliance side and the security side. Down market, I've always found security is, unless it's someone who had an incident, ends up being this sort of like second fiddle conversation to compliance, which maybe is a little bit more of the business driver. Maybe Ryan, to start with you, I'm curious, like, has this brought security more to the forefront of any conversations, or if you're sort of very focused on the compliance side? How how's AI changing those conversations for you?
Yeah, so I actually have a really good example of how AI is changing the conversation in compliance. So I have a client who approached me recently and they want to completely replace their change management process with agents. So an agent that does the coding, an agent that does the approval or the peer review, an agent that does the testing. And they want to try and do it without any humans in the loop and move straight to deployment. And of course, me being the compliance guy, I had a lot of things to say about that. And it's not just about making sure that the agent knows what it's doing. It's also about making sure that now I have a new set of controls I need to think about. What about the inputs? Am I making sure that the data that I'm ingesting into these agents is accurate? And as things change over time, these AI agents could be trained a certain way, but as the ecosystem or the application develops, you could stray away from that. So I asked the client and I said, well, what are you doing to monitor the inputs and then the outputs of what these agents are doing? That's not a typical change management level control. But when you think about it from a risk-based perspective, it's making sure that what these agents are doing is actually up to date and realistic with the outputs. So how often are you checking the outputs to make sure they're doing what they're supposed to be doing? And of course, with me being the risk adverse guy, I always like to say too, in the beginning, it's really important you have some level of human in the loop. And you could still save time, you could still save on resources, but it's just having that one last check be the human, I think is still really, really important.
Well, and I think
Yeah,
that I was going to say the
please.
key to that is you need to move from uh, the use case that you just described is somebody who's going, to zero human input, right? If you took a process on board a new employee, right, or whatever, maybe that's a 10-hour process. If you can move that to 4 hours of still human interaction, or 2 hours of still human interaction, and automate part of the process with AI, then you have a win, right? When you
Exactly.
move it to zero input from the human, again, you lose control. You don't know where you're going to go. And as these agents and models develop, I notice for myself, I get different answers in Claude, whether I'm running, Opus or Sonnet or Fable, right? The different models, you get slightly different answers, right? So it becomes very, very important to make sure that humans in the loop and not getting to a fully automated state where it's, I don't want it to be my thermostat, right? Your thermostat is set and forget,
Yeah,
right? Your oven is not, right? Your oven, you got to turn off and on. You got to monitor.
exactly. Another example too that, is kind of changing the conversation with clients is I'm asking them, okay, so you implement a lot of AI in your environment, what What about your incident response? How are you doing tabletop exercises? Are they AI enabled? Are you coming up with scenarios if there's a breach around AI? What are you doing from that perspective? And of course, usually it's not anything in place, but it's something to get them to start thinking about and implementing those level of exercises to better prepare the organization if there were an incident.
Yeah, so this is an interesting stream in your guys' own compliance and security practices. How are some of these tools changing the way you guys do your work? Coming up with tabletop exercises is a pretty fun example.
Hmm. Exactly. And some examples I've given to clients, pretend that there is a deep fake or a voice clone or some type of prompt injection scenario. Run through those and and maybe do it in a black box perspective just to see how the organization and subject matter experts or react to that and learn from it.
Not only do we have to, work with our clients and provide them the best advisory services we can. We're also swimming in the same pond. I think this is what you're alluding to, Josh. And we're wading into the AI pool ourselves in terms of how we can do better, right? How we can deliver better quality advisory, better quality solutions to to our clients. So, there's definitely an AI component. We're a little bit learning as we go. I think the difference for us is we approached it from a security mindset from day one, right? We wanted to establish the guardrails, make sure that any information that we're putting into an AI model has been anonymized, that we're controlling what goes in, and we're controlling how it gets distributed and gets processed. So we're taking, I'll call them, baby steps into the AI world, but doing it very thoughtfully. I think a lot of the problems I see with our clients is they don't do that, right? They say, look, I can use AI to read a contract and spit back to me, questions that I should go back to a government contracting officer with. And they forget that the information that they have is maybe CUI, controlled unclassified information. If not, it's just federal information, and they've got a certain responsibility to protect that. And they're just throwing it in these AI models, some of which they're not even paying for, some of which they haven't even turned off the ability to share. And next thing here's a company that's wanting to win a government contract to build things for the Department of Defense, and the first thing they've done is take the bid and put it into an AI model, and it's out online.
Well, an interesting, I think, issue at the part of the curve we're in for this technology adoption is when you're at this early part of the curve, you sort of don't have the new tools that are required to implement the policies we might have in a sort of dream world. What kind of data goes into the models is like, I think, a perfect example of it. So what organizations do? Well, they say, all right, what are the tools we have at our disposal? We can say, this is on or off, like you can use it or you cannot. That's a pretty blunt edge. The second is, oh, how can we like graft some of the tools of the old world around it, right? So, everyone and their brother may be talking about an AI firewall. Oh, we're going to put really another model and we're going to like sandbox this one off and we're going to run a model and be like, oh, is this a question about, does this have, financial data in it or something? Oh, and as a result, you can't send it over. So I think that's a really tricky part. And then, obviously a lot of ink gets spilled in terms of, oh, what should governance, what should the tools of this era and of, what should the levers that get exposed around this technology look like for us to have like the right level of governance around it and to have safe adoption for organizations. And we're just at such an early part of the curve. Those things don't really exist yet. So you end up in a bit of an interesting scenario. But Ryan, I think you mentioned an example of maybe a healthcare company you guys work at. I find healthcare is one of the biggest ones we have here where people always have different models and they're like, oh, do we need to say, do we need to have a BAA with every model, or can we have the ability to like turn you know, know if people are going to type PHI into Claude or OpenAI or whatever it might be. But yeah, tell us a little bit about what you have going on in the healthcare world.
Yeah. So, there's There's a new update actually coming out to HIPAA that's actually recently been delayed. So the HIPAA security rules getting an update, but upon looking more at it, it's not really updated for AI related risks. And so I always like to tell people that even with these regulations and these updated regulations, they're still going to be behind the times. And so they are considered the bare minimum, I would say, of what you need to have in place, to be in compliance with the law. I largely rely on high trust a lot, which is basically a healthcare based certification that you can get with a lot of requirements that do map to HIPAA. But they've been at the forefront and the pioneers of AI related healthcare security. They've actually released an AI security based certification that actually goes through a questionnaire and asks you, like, how are you using AI in your environment? Are you training models? Are you developing your own models? Are you using a separate LLM? And then actually devises a control list of items that you should have in place, which I really like and appreciate. And it's actually pretty comprehensive. I have a couple clients that are actually going through it. If they have an offering around AI, or if they have an internal system that uses AI, maybe for reviewing claims or enrollment files and things like that, they can rely on the high trust AI certification to provide a level of assurance that the AI that they're using in their environment is being used appropriately, securely, and that they've accounted for the risks around AI.
Great. Michael, actually, maybe leads me to an interesting question for you. Curious, how do you feel? I think, there's sort of the upside risk around, are we adopting these technologies fast enough to be competitive? And the downside risk of like, ooh, is there data security risk here? I'd be curious from your on the ground sort of experience recently, like, how are people approaching this? How are people weighing these upside and downside risks? Is the fear you were describing of, we're going to drop some CUI into ChatGPT, is this stopping people, do you think?
Well, no is the short answer, because people are going to look. Let's take the assumption employees are there to do a good job, and they want to do a good job, and they want to get better, they want to be more productive, and they hear and they see, and they know there are tools out there that can make them better, right? So, that the company that did that didn't do it with any malice, right? They did it because they want to process contracts. So there's always going to be that trial and error, that exploratory nature within a business, if the business is going to succeed. So I think it needs to come from management. Right? I think the shortcoming in most medium-sized enterprises is that they haven't talked about this at the C-suite, at the management table, uh, so that they can set ground rules for how people are using AI within the organization. Um, so I think there's a real management leadership gap. And one of the things is, I talk to our clients, especially as I do executive briefings, is, you know, the CEO, the management team needs to be making those decisions, right? It's not an IT decision. It's not that I can use AI to produce, a better production schedule for a manufacturing facility. I can, right? The question is, should I? And that's a management question, not a operations question, or not an IT question.
Yeah,
And
this is one of the best things I feel like I'd heard someone say around security, which is like, yeah, the security person and the IT person, they can't be the people that are really holding this risk. Really, what it has to be is like, all the functional business owners are holding the risk, and it's sort of your job to make sure people have the tools to make the right decisions. But IT and security can't always be the people holding the risk, because it doesn't quite make sense. I
Yeah,
do want to ask. We're kind of circling around what I think is always an interesting moment here. Anytime you walk into a new client, there's this, nearly pull your hair out. Oh my God, they're doing what? Sort of moment. Michael, maybe we'll start with you, then Ryan will go to you. Of Yeah, any good moments here with AI of interesting, maybe slightly spicy things, or those oh my God, what inducing things people are doing?
it's so, and again, I touched on earlier, this shadow AI, shadow IT, right? Where folks are going out and getting their own, chat accounts, ChatGPT or whatever. I think that is the biggest, revelation when I sit down and talk with CEOs. And look, the tools exist. Microsoft tools exist to tell you where everything is leaving your network, right? You know who connects to ChatGPT. You can see it. But when you sit down and talk to a CEO and say, look, you've got employees going to, you know, read my contract to me, an AI tool that'll read contracts, or, you know, Stock Picker Pro, or
Think
hell,
about if you use like Grammarly, the AI
Grammarly.
Grammarly.
I'm a big proponent of Grammarly, right?
I know,
So,
me too.
I tell people English is my second language. But so all of these tools are out there, they're getting used. Organizations don't know it. And once you bring that to attention, once you show them, once you get them to turn on, Defender for Cloud Apps, if they're a Microsoft shop, and they could see where their employees are going, they could see the websites that are getting used, software as a service that's getting used. It's eye opening, right, in terms of what's out there.
Yeah, this is the critical thing, right? Because we actually just released some functionality around AI visibility, where right you have to. This is everywhere, so you have to be able to have the ability to look across, the endpoints, cloud apps, identity. Hey, things that aren't just your, sanctioned cloud apps, but what are the things people are maybe OAuthing into, or navigating to on their work devices. So there's quite a broad array of things you have to look at here, which we just released some functionality around. And that gets to the second point, which is also, I think, a little what you're talking about, Michael, which is, all right, most organizations aren't going to be forward thinking enough. And it's probably not even the right thing to do to just say like, hey, a priori, here's what good AI usage is going to look like. You kind of have to let some amount of this organic usage happen. So, where are the areas that could be incredibly impactful for the business? Once you have a good understanding of that baseline, then you can do two really important things. Number one, you can build a lot of automation and secure defaults to help establish that baseline. Maybe that's things like, hey, if you are going to standardize around a single provider, okay, everyone has Claude Desktop and, the Claude Chrome extension and, Claude.ai pinned to their Chrome toolbar on their first day, right? And you do these kinds of things. And then the second thing you do is you detect variance from it, which there will inevitably be as well. And if you do both of those two things right, I feel like that's a pretty good path for good, secure, and like well-governed AI adoption. Until we actually saw something crazy at one of our healthcare clients the other day, which was it's pretty crazy actually. We just published a blog on it, but someone had basically had some malware embedded into a file they called Claude desktop.zip. They hosted it in a Claude artifact, so actually at Claude.ai, and then we're distributing the link, which is actually like a malicious link to some malicious software. And, we caught it sort of in real time, which is kind of in this bucket of like, use something like a CrowdStrike or some other tools to like detect the variance from it and remediate really quickly. So yeah, it's a little bit of what's old is new again, certainly, and a lot of the kind of baseline attacks here. But that was one of the recent surprises we saw, which had us saying, okay, there's a lot to do here.
I think one thing that's interesting too, you talked about how, organizations are figuring out where AI is providing them the best ROI. That's great. And that's wonderful that they're doing that too. But that also opens up an additional opportunity now that I've figured out where my advancements could be, I now can also do an understanding of what the risks are. I think if once you understand the ROI, you'll then have a better understanding of risk and better be able to put the right precautions in place that doesn't impede people's ability to do their job, but implement enough security so that you're mitigating the right level of risk for your organization.
Right. Yeah, it's exactly right. You need to understand your risk, and management needs to understand the risks. I've gotten away from the term, risk assessment. For most of our clients, we're doing some kind of gap assessment, a controls assessment. Risk is a management problem, right? And is my manufacturing floor going to get shut down because if we've exposed AI, right, or whatever it happens to be? Define the risks to the business, and then evaluate those risks. And I think that's a fundamental shift that the information security world is taking, going away from very control based, do this, encrypt that, lock this down, to really risk management. And I think, Ryan, and I'm sure that you see this too, is that our job, Josh, your job is to help executives talk about risk and then transfer that to a set of technical controls, people, process, and technology on how we address those risks.
Exactly.
Amazing. Well, guys, this has been great. Is there anything else I should have asked you about, or maybe we'll start with you, Ryan? Any departing thoughts for us?
One thing I think we didn't touch on, I think is really important, just talking about risks of AI and how, the ability to enact an attack is a lot greater now and it requires less cost, less experience. But think about it too about vulnerability management. If you think about it from the perspective of, oh, a new vulnerability, a new CVE just came out, think about how quickly it can be now to actually exploit a CVE nowadays. So I really think organizations really need to take another step back at their vulnerability management practices and really think, should I really wait a week to, mitigate a high vulnerability? Should I really wait a month to mitigate a moderate vulnerability? Those are some of the things that I always think about and always try to coach my clients on. And the vulnerability management practices of the past are not how they are today.
Yeah, that was something I sort of came around on. I was kind of like, yeah, that's not really how most attacks happen anyway. Like as a key dependency, it'll probably be fine. It'll be more efficient, and all that good stuff. But as the numbers have come out this year, it's like, oh yeah, people are writing a lot more exploits for CVEs, and probably not people, probably these LLMs are. But yeah, no, I think it's a great and an ever important point. Michael, anything from you? Anything we should have covered? Any
One
departing
of the
thoughts?
one of the areas we didn't touch on, and I think you and I talked about it before, Josh, is that AI doesn't make you smart. It makes smart people smarter, but it's not going to take a layman and turn them into an internet or an IT security professional. You can't, AI is not going to make somebody a CPA. Uh, Now CPAs can do their job better, more efficiently. So I think as executives really start to think about how they're going to deploy AI, it really needs to be with that mindset that, look, I want to take my staff and I want to make them better. I want to make them more productive. I don't want to replace them with an AI agent, right? So I think that's a key differentiator. And I think as we talk to our clients, you know, once they get that, then that opens up the whole conversation. What can we do with AI? How can we protect the data? So having those kind of why are we doing it? What's it for kind of conversations then trickles down to, okay, like anything else, we got to protect it, right? We went to the internet, we built websites, we got client portals. As we've done all that over the past decades, we've always done it with the idea to build the security into it. I think if management kind of thinks about what they're doing ahead of time and really builds an AI strategy that includes information security, I think they'll be in the top 10%, right? They won't be the slowest gazelle.
Yeah.
That's a good point. I mean, AI is a strategic endeavor and it starts at the top. Definitely agree.
Well, I think that's as good a note as any to leave it on. So I can't thank you both enough for doing this. Really appreciate it. We'll look forward to doing it again soon. Maybe when the next breakthrough technology comes out. No,
Yeah.
well before then, certainly. And
But it,
we'll
it seems, and look, I got a little more gray hair. First, it was mobile phones, then it was internet access, then it was software as a service. Yeah, this is just another step in the path. But it's a step that's evolving rapidly. So yeah, I'm sure we'll be on a conversation again soon.
all right, guys. Well, thanks so much. Yeah, I appreciate getting the chance to work with you guys. Appreciate this conversation, and we'll speak soon.
Awesome. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so
Thanks.
much.
Nice meeting you,
Bye.
Ryan.
You as well.